Good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for coming down. My name is Steve Elzy. I'm with KRML Radio, and this is Whalefest Monterey 2017. This is the 7th iteration of Whalefest. So we're so happy that we have people coming into the symposium and visiting the exhibits outside. And this is our first lecture. It's going to be terrific. Let me just say that the gentleman coming up here oversees the largest national marine sanctuary in the continental United States. I consider him a colleague, but I also am very proud and honored to consider him one of my friends. Please welcome Superintendent Michel.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and I know I'm competing with a beautiful day outside, so thanks for taking time to come in this dark theater when it's such a beautiful sunny day outside, and we've got such great exhibitors outside. The purpose of my talk today is really just to give you an update of what's happening with the National Marine Sanctuary here, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. But I thought I'd start with, because not everyone knows what a National Marine Sanctuary is, kind of start with a little bit of a primer about what are National Marine Sanctuaries, what the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is, and then at the very end I want to give you an update of what's happening with your National Marine Sanctuary here in Monterey Bay. So up on the screen here I've got a graphic that shows the system, the nationwide system of National Marine Sanctuaries. You know, not many people realize this, but your National Marine Sanctuaries, these are federal protected marine areas, protect over 170,000 square miles of ocean. That's more than all of your national parks and national forests combined. So it's a huge area. Steve mentioned that Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is the largest marine sanctuary here in California, or here in the continental U.S. at over 6,000 square miles. We've got some really big ones out. American Samoa is almost 10,000 square miles, as well as the Papahanaumokuakea, the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, is just a gigantic size, the size of California. So we've got these huge marine protected areas that are really, you know, the jewels of our nation's coastal, marine, and Great Lakes waters. So I want to just kind of let you know, what a marine sanctuary is. Monterey Bay is a really challenging place to protect and manage because it's one of the few sanctuary sites that has this land-sea connection. So we've got all those issues that come with water quality and human impacts, human uses that occur along the shores and along the coast and offshore here too. So 276 miles of coast from the Marin Headlands all the way down to Cambria and San Luis Obispo County. So the marine sanctuaries are kind of like your national forests in that there's all these multiple uses that occur here. And the job of a marine sanctuary is to facilitate those uses, but with this sort of umbrella of resource protection. So all those uses that can occur that are compatible with resource protection. So we've got commercial recreational fishing here. We've got homeland security and military operations. We've got research institutions doing work. We've got shipping, all these uses that are occurring out in the marine environment and onshore as well. Many of you have heard me talk about this special place, and those of you that live here know what a special place Monterey Bay is, just with all the incredible wildlife. And we call it the Serengeti of the sea, kind of analogous to the wildlands of Africa and all the predator-prey relationships there and the migratory species. But really, this place dwarfs that in comparison. We've got so many different marine mammal species and fish species and seabirds that are either resident here or come here to feed. I call this also the Big Blue Buffet because there's so much productivity here in Monterey Bay because of the upwelling that occurs here annually, that nutrient-rich, oxygen-rich deep water that comes up to the surface that's fueled by the sunlight here creates this explosion of phytoplankton that feeds the marine ecosystem here. So you've got things like leatherback turtles that breed in Indonesia that come all the way across the Pacific to feed on jellyfish here in Monterey Bay. You've got albatross that fly back and forth across the Pacific multiple times during the year. So you've got, this place is just alive with animals all the time. It's why, this is probably the whale watching capital of the world. When you think about We've got probably 25 or 30 different wildlife viewing operators just here in Monterey Bay. They take people out to see wildlife. So this place really pops. How many of you here saw Big Blue Live, the PBS, BBC production? Phenomenal. And so that's worldwide attention on this special place. But we know there are many threats that we are entrusted to try to manage. Things like just the amount of trash and plastics, the amount of entanglement issues we have with, and ingestion issues with marine mammals and seabirds that mistake trash and debris and plastics for food. We have whale ship strikes. We have vessel groundings. We probably deal with a boat a month that goes aground and breaks up on the shore that we work with folks to get cleaned up as soon as possible. And then we've got big vexing climate change issues that we're struggling with, things like ocean acidification that's making the ocean more acidic. That's a real problem for any kind of shell-forming organisms. Basically, the food web, the beginning of the food web is impacted by ocean acidification. So lots of threats that we're dealing with and trying to address, working with multiple partners here. Just a lot. We are so fortunate. There's so much science and research that goes on here. We've got 25 or so different marine science institutions that we work with. And what we try to do is, we don't have a big research budget, but what we do is we try to plan the research projects that occur here and facilitate those. We try to encourage the many research institutions to do science that helps us better manage this place. So what are the key management questions that we have, and what's the science behind answering those questions? That's what we focus on. So we're involved with nearshore kelp forest monitoring, offshore, deep shore characterization, working with MBARI, because MBARI, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, has all the great deep sea toys, as I call them, these robotic vehicles that can go to the deep ocean and help us explore. You know, we know more about the moon surface than we know about our own deep sea. And so every time we go out and do exploration in the deep sea, we find new species, we find new cool places that need to be explored and mapped and characterized. So we're involved in a number of different marine science explorations and monitoring. And I encourage you to visit actually our website. And we have a special subpart of our website called Simon. And it has sort of a whole list of all the science and research that's occurring here in Monterey Bay. And what's really cool, which is most popular, is there's thousands and thousands of great photographs that are free for you to use. If you're doing a school paper, or if you're doing a talk sometime, or if you just want to download some really cool pictures, maybe you could take them to the printer and have them printed off. These are free for you, because it's the National Marine Sanctuary. It's your sanctuary. So protection is our mandate, and we've got many, many protection challenges. We're working with the state on the state marine protected areas. We're doing monitoring and helping with enforcement and doing science with the state marine protected areas. We're involved with whale entanglement responses. So every once in a while we come across, or people out on the water come across, whales that are entangled in fishing gear primarily. We have a response team that we work with that goes out and tries to free these whales from their entanglements. We have a lot of enforcement with the U.S. Coast Guard and with State Department of Fish and Wildlife wardens. We've been working on a thing called CESAs, which is a sanctuary ecologically significant areas. We've identified the really deep parts of the ocean that are really interesting to us, that have exceptional qualities that we would like to see further studied and protected. And so we've identified those, and working with the Pacific Fishery Management Council to identify what areas we might offer through that process to open back up to commercial fishing that have been closed for a long time, as well as close some areas from commercial fishing that we think are really special, and the fishermen agree. So lots of challenges. Water quality, like I said earlier, is a big one. We've got an army of volunteers that goes out and does water quality sampling for us. We've got 18 years now of water quality data from volunteers that are going out and taking samples and helping us do the analysis on water quality. So we know where the problem spots are. And we work with agriculture, too, on a non-regulatory approach to improving water quality that comes from ag lands. And education outreach is one of our biggest focuses, because not many people know what a marine sanctuary is. Not many people know what a special place this is, what ocean conservation and stewardship means, and how important it is to be involved with that. And so we've got two fantastic visitor centers, one in Santa Cruz, the Exploration Center right across the street from the beach boardwalk. We've got another smaller center down in San Simeon, the Coastal Discovery Center. And so through our visitor centers, through the programming there, through special events, through videos that we've done with AMP, actually Access Monterey Peninsula and the Sanctuary did a number of really cool videos called Your Sanctuary TV, which are free for the download on YouTube. There's a YouTube channel called Your Sanctuary TV. We do a lot of signage. You may have seen some of the signage along the bike path that just allows people to understand better what they're looking at when they're on the bike path, whether it's the seals or sea lions that you're seeing or the offshore rocks. And we're really intent on promoting recreation and tourism. So we're involved a lot in promoting recreation and tourism and smart wildlife viewing. We want people to go out and enjoy wildlife, but we want them to do it in a respectful way and not intrude on wildlife, harass wildlife. And so we've got guidelines on how you can enjoy the wildlife without disturbing them. So here's kind of the main points that I wanted to talk about in terms of what's happening right now. And I call them our big lifts. And we've got some big lifts in 2017. It may not be the most exciting or sexy thing, but we have a management plan that guides what we do. It is a sort of a 5 to 10 year document that lays out all of our actions that we want to implement, and it's a very public document. It's a very public involvement process. We have lots of meetings with the public. We have a Sanctuary Advisory Council that's members of the public and other agencies. And right now we're doing an update to that plan. So that means everything that's in that plan is now open to update and revise. And so we have that management plan update going on right now. And a couple of really key issues that came up during public scoping had to do with wildlife disturbance. And I think it was a matter of just the timing. If you remember Big Blue Live and all the attention that came to Monterey Bay about what an incredible place this is to view wildlife, we saw a huge uptick in the number of visitors coming here to view wildlife. At the same time, we had a huge number of reports of wildlife disturbance and harassment, whether that's people just getting too close to marine mammals or sea otters or elephant seals down south, having their dogs run and play with sea otters or trying to get pictures jumping on top of seals or sea lions. It was just crazy. And so at about that same time, we were doing public scoping for our management plan, and so the public was really upset about how much wildlife disturbance that they were seeing. And so we have formed 2 working groups that are studying the issue. One really focused more on whale approach, so the distance that you can get to whales safely that don't harass them. There's another sort of side group that's working on more of the shore-based wildlife viewing. But another working group is working on acoustics, so sound in the ocean. We know that the ocean is a noisy place. Not only noisy because of all the animals that are making noise for their own way in which they navigate and feed and communicate with each other, but it's a noisy place because of all the human noise that's in the ocean too. So we want to get a better understanding of what the soundscape is in the ocean. And so we're going to be working with our research partners to put instrumentation out in the ocean to better characterize what does the ocean sound like, and is it too noisy for certain species, and what we might be able to do about that in the future. So that's management plan update. You may have heard about desalination. It kind of is a big topic here on the water limited Monterey Peninsula. So we are heavily involved in 3 big proposed projects for desalination. CalAM's project, which is moving forward right now through regulatory review. We're basically the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act lead, so we're doing the federal environmental review of these projects. So there's the CalAM project, the Deepwater Desal project, and the Peoples project. So all 3 of these are moving forward through our environmental review to help us make informed and better decisions, along with the state agencies that are looking at these as well. Visitor center operations and programming, I said before, is a big emphasis for us. And it's expensive to run visitor centers and do programming. So we're constantly looking at ways of doing fundraising, ways of doing more with others, and making our visitor centers really a community asset. It's fantastic. I don't know how many of you have seen the visitor center in Santa Cruz, Exploration Center, but it is a phenomenal facility. So we want to make that really a community asset. So beyond just being a place to be informed and inspired about the ocean and sanctuaries, We want to be a place where people can have parties, to have special events. We've had several weddings that have occurred there. It's just kind of a special place, and people are really recognizing it as such. I mentioned deep sea characterization earlier. We've got some cool studies with MBARI on deep sea coral. You know, you wouldn't think that the deep ocean would have much life in it. When you go down 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 feet, and there's no light down there, it's dark, it's cold. The pressure down there would just crush organisms. But there are giant corals and sponges as big as you and I. They're the old growth forests of the ocean. And they provide key habitat for certain species of groundfish that are commercially viable. Every time we go to some of these places, we find more of these communities of deep sea corals and sponges, and really interesting new species. And what's really critical to that is no one's ever really done coral restoration in the deep ocean. It's done a lot in tropical areas, tropical reef systems where there's huge reef die-offs. Their scientists have perfected ways of growing coral in laboratories and transplanting that to reefs to rebuild those reefs. But no one's ever done it in the deep ocean. For one, it's so expensive to even get there. But we know that the deep ocean corals and sponges have been damaged by historical trawling in some places. They're in the Gulf of Mexico with the giant oil spill, the BP oil spill, several years ago. Lots of deep sea corals and sponges there were wiped out. And so we're working with MBARI about how to do coral restoration in the deep ocean. And we've got some really promising techniques. And if we can perfect those, which we think we can, we will be leading the way nationwide, worldwide, on how you do deep sea coral restoration. So that's pretty exciting. And then one thing that I'm really excited about, and I hope you'll join us this year, as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. I don't know how many of you were around during its designation. Nick was. And it's hard to believe 25 years has gone by and so much has been accomplished, and so much more work is needed to do. But we're gonna take time to recognize 25 years and celebrate that this year. We've got a speaker series that we're going to be doing up at the Visitor Center in Santa Cruz. All will be culminating in September, the weekend of September 16th. So mark your calendars. We're going to be doing some special events here in Monterey to celebrate our 25th year anniversary. So that's really what I wanted to talk with you about this morning, to give you an update and make sure you know what the Marine Sanctuary is. And there's lots of ways to get involved. I encourage you to become a water quality volunteer, be a Team Ocean or Baynet volunteer, to come to our advisory council meetings and tell us what's on your mind about your Marine Sanctuary. Lots of ways to get involved, and I'd love to see you at our visitor centers as well. So thanks for coming. I know it's a beautiful day outside. And I want to encourage you to like Steve said, to go and see all the great exhibitors out there. And if we have time, I can take a few questions.
You definitely have time.
Okay.
So we have questions from anybody?
Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
You spoke about a number of threats that you're working on with the Monterey Bay Estuary and Sanctuary. What about the political threats from the new administration as far as cuts to your budget,
Right.
the Commerce Secretary, which is hostile to the environment? That seems to be an overriding threat that maybe your management plan update needs to contemplate.
So the question is about sort of beyond what we would typically view as threats to the Marine Sanctuary from human uses and impacts. The question is about the current administration and political threats to environmental protection and the sanctuary. Well, because I work for the federal government and the Marine Sanctuary, and this new administration is my boss, I have to carefully choose my words. But there's really nothing new about our budget challenge. It's been, since I've been here 10 years, our budget challenge has gotten even more challenging year to year. And so that creates, we have to prioritize the work that we do. I don't see that really changing. We will continue to struggle through our budget to do what we have to do. I think that we're just going to have to double down on our efforts to communicate, education and outreach, how important the Marine Sanctuary is, how relevant and valued it is to our communities, how it encourages and facilitates tourism. Without this marine sanctuary here, we might be looking at oil fields offshore, or we might be looking at closed beaches because of pollution. So these are the kind of things we need to speak more about. We need to have the public speak more about how important the marine sanctuary is. And I think if those things can resonate across the country and to the politics, then we'll be the better for that. That's the best I can do on that. Yes. Steve?
Paul, you talked about desalination plants, but do you feel that if the aquifers were tapped out and the Carmel River wasn't available, I don't think you can pull water out of there anymore. Is it possible to have sufficient desalination plants that don't have much impact on the ocean? Obviously, they always will, but sufficient plants to supply all the water that we would need?
So, Steve, that's a great question. The question is about desal and, can we do desal in an environmentally conscious, sustainable way? And what is really the need for desal? I think as the two main points that you were asking about. And we've known that desal is going to be a huge issue for California as well as the Central Coast for many years. And so that's why we worked 10 years ago on desal guidelines, which is basically, if you're going to do desal here on the Central Coast, here's how we want to see it done. We don't want to see a plethora of small package plants that have cumulatively more impact. We want to see a regional solution to desal. If you're going to do desal, we want to see subsurface intake, so not big open ocean intakes that entrain and entrap marine organisms in those screens. We want to see clean ways of disposing of the brine, because we take in the ocean water, we separate the salt, which is the brine, from the fresh water, and that's what's delivered to customers. So we want to see sustainable ways of dealing with brine as well. So with regard to the current projects that are being proposed, Cal-Am is proposing subsurface slant well technology. They're proposed to drill underneath the sanctuary, about 300 feet below the seabed. And so they're using the sand and the substrate as filters, so there won't be any entrapment of organisms as they draw water and then desalinate it and deliver it to customers. Deepwater Desal and Peoples projects are proposing open ocean intakes, big massive pipes you could drive a truck through, they're so big, and to draw water in and desalinate water for customers. Now the Carmel River is an interesting issue because part of what's driving Cal-Am is the court order to stop the overdraft of the Carmel River. And so once if Cal-Am's project comes online, they'll stop that. Well, they're limited to a certain amount of acre feet per year on the Carmel River. They'll have to go back to that, what they're limited to, and then use the desalinated water for customers. So I think there's a regional solution. One key question for us is, what is the true need? And so we're going to be working with the Coastal Commission and local governments to try to get a better handle on what that true water need is, because we don't want to design systems that are taking in too much seawater and there's not really the customers for it. So we want to be mindful of any growth-inducing impacts and things like that from an abundant supply of water. And it's not going to be cheap either. It's expensive technology. Yes?
What sort of protections specifically have been put on this particular sanctuary?
Okay, so the question is, what particular protections are there in this sanctuary? So we have about a dozen regulations that we enforce. We have sort of the big three, which you could not get a permit for, you can never do. There's no oil and gas development here in this sanctuary. There's no new sewage outfalls, and there's no new dredge disposal sites. So those three are off the table. Those are our big three regulations you can't get a permit for. Now, our other regulations you might be able to get a permit for if you can prove that you would do them in a way in which don't harm the sanctuary. So things like seafloor disturbance. We have a regulation that says you can't disturb the seafloor. But we have lots of projects that come our way, like research projects that want to place instruments on the seafloor or lay cables or pipelines on the seafloor that we have given permits for in the past through ways in which they've mitigated those impacts or they've minimized those impacts. We have a prohibition against any discharge in the sanctuary. Well, we know there's discharges all over the place. There's discharges from sewage plants, from stormwater, and those go through state permitting that we authorize. So there are a number of, and there's things like do not disturb wildlife, do not interfere with a law enforcement officer. So there's a number of these regulations that we enforce, but I always start with the big three, those you'll never see here in this marine sanctuary: no oil and gas, no new sewage outfalls, and no additional dredge disposal sites. And how are we doing on time?
We are right where we need to be,
So,
and we want to thank you.
oh, thank you, and I'm available for any other questions. See me at the break. Thank you so much for coming and spending this beautiful Saturday morning here with me. Thanks.